Have you ever wondered what it truly means to find independence and strength in the face of life's challenges? In today's video, we'll dive into the inspiring journey of Aunt Fong, a 60-year-old woman who defied the odds after losing her husband and facing financial uncertainty. Her story is not just about survival. It's about empowerment, resilience, and the courage to take control of one's life. You'll discover how Aunt Fong navigated her struggles without relying on her unfilial son or a pension. Her experience reveals valuable lessons on self-reliance, the importance of planning for the future, and how to create a fulfilling life despite obstacles. By the end of this video, you'll not only be inspired by Aunt Fong's determination, but also equipped with practical insights that can help you or someone you know embrace independence in challenging times. So stay tuned as we uncover the compelling details of Aunt Fong's story and learn how anyone can take charge of their destiny, regardless of age or circumstance. Don't miss out. This could change your perspective on life and relationships forever. If you are not subscribed, I recommend subscribing and activating the notification bell so you don't miss any videos. Your support means a lot to me, and if you enjoyed this video, you can help me continue spreading the valuable lessons by liking and sharing it. If you like the topic of this video, please comment 1. If you don't, please comment 0 to let me know how I can improve and make better videos for you. Now, let's begin. I am 60 years old this year, and I have always lived in the countryside. Life out here is quiet, simple, and full of routines. The fields, the animals, the seasons, they all shape our days. But over 20 years ago, my life took a turn that I could never have anticipated, a moment that marked my soul forever. My husband was working on a construction site far from home, trying to provide for us. He worked long, grueling hours, day after day, in the heat and the cold, doing everything he could to ensure we had enough. Then, one day, he was gone. A work accident, they called it, something unavoidable, something that happened too quickly for anyone to do anything about it. I remember feeling like I had been struck by lightning, unable to move, unable to think, as the news settled over me like a storm. My husband was my rock, the one constant in my life, and an instant, he was gone. After the accident, the construction site boss came to me. He was an older man, his face lined with worry and what I thought might be guilt. He handed me 300,000 yuan. I remember that amount precisely because it felt so strange to see money stacked up in front of me, meant to replace my husband. The boss explained, in a voice that sounded rehearsed as if he had gone through this routine before, that this was the only money he could offer. He told me that he was practically bankrupt himself, that if I wanted any more compensation, it would be impossible. Even if he sold everything he owned, he said, he couldn't gather another yuan. He added that if I was willing to settle privately, I could take the 300,000 yuan and sign a consent form. Then, this whole matter would be over. But he also gave me a warning. He said that if I wanted to pursue legal action, I would likely end up with nothing. His construction site, he claimed, was barely holding on, and he said he was already insolvent, as if that word could somehow make me feel less bitter. I didn't know what to do. I felt so utterly alone in that moment, staring at this man who was both the cause of my loss and the only person offering any form of help, however small and hollow it felt. I thought about the long hours my husband had spent on that site, all the nights he came home telling me about how the boss delayed paying wages. Sometimes, the men would go months without seeing a single payment. My husband used to laugh it off, saying that as long as he had work, we would be okay. But now, here was that same boss, with those same excuses, telling me that this was all he could give. I thought about the future, about the emptiness that lay ahead. Our life had been modest. We weren't wealthy, but we managed to make ends meet. My husband's earnings from the construction site combined with my small income from farming were enough for us to live a simple life. But now, without him, it was as if my whole life had been thrown into darkness. There was no one left to help me shoulder the burdens, no one to lean on when the days felt too long and the nights too cold. I had to make a choice, and I was terrified of choosing wrongly. What if I refused this 300,000 yuan and was left with nothing at all? I was aware of the risks. I knew how uncertain any legal action would be, especially against a man who already had nothing to give. So, with a heavy heart, I took the money, signed a consent form, and watched as the boss walked away, feeling as if a part of me had been taken with him. If you are still watching this video and find these lessons useful, please comment 1 below to let me know that you are still here with me. For a while, I sat there in disbelief, holding the money, feeling its weight yet knowing it could never replace the love and life I had lost. With my husband gone, our household became painfully quiet, and each day seemed to stretch longer than the last. The 300,000 yuan sat in my hands, a cold reminder of the man I loved and the life we had shared. It was enough to sustain me for a while, but I knew it wouldn't last forever. I couldn't afford to spend it carelessly. Every single purchase felt like a gamble against my future. I counted every coin, every bill, wondering how long I could stretch it, how long I could make this small fortune last before it, too, was gone. Without my husband's income, I quickly realized how fragile our finances truly were. I could no longer rely on the small farming income to support us fully. Before, we had always managed to get by, no matter how tight things were because we had each other. But now, I was left alone with nothing but memories and a dwindling stack of money. I was afraid of what would happen once the money ran out, afraid of what lay ahead in the years to come. The days became a blur of endless work and quiet solitude, as I struggled to make sense of a world that had taken so much from me. And every time I looked at that 300,000 yuan, I was reminded that sometimes, all the money in the world couldn't fill the void left by a loved one's absence. In the end, life went on, as it always does, but the pain and the struggle remained. Each day, I carried the weight of that loss, the uncertainty, and the fear. And I wondered, as I still do, if I had made the right choice all those years ago, accepting the boss's offer and signing away my chance for more. But then, what choice did I have? In a world where money is valued so highly, it felt like I had lost everything and gained nothing in return. The year my husband passed away was a year I'll never forget, a year marked by an aching emptiness that seemed to swallow me whole. Our son was only 18 at the time, barely an adult, and struggling to find his footing. He had just lost his father, his guide, and his rock. We both did. I was so consumed by grief that I felt as though I were walking through life in a fog, barely able to get through each day. There were moments I'd catch myself staring out the window, watching the world move on, feeling more alone than ever, trying to keep my emotions in check for my son's sake. But he saw through me, recognizing the sorrow and helplessness that clouded my every move. One evening, with a surprising maturity, he came to me, his face a mixture of determination and concern. "Mom, I want to go to the city to find work and make money," he said, his words filled with an earnestness I hadn't seen before. I was taken aback, partly because I hadn't expected him to take on such a big responsibility so soon. He was still so young, so innocent in many ways. And yet, in that moment, he seemed so much older, as if losing his father had forced him to grow up overnight. At that time, he had just completed his college entrance exams. We had held out hope, even in the middle of all the chaos and grief, that perhaps he might get into a decent college and pursue his studies. But his results had been disappointing, and he hadn't made it into any reputable institution, not even a junior college. I could see the disappointment in his eyes, a glimmer of frustration, and perhaps a touch of shame. It pained me because I knew he had tried, yet life hadn't dealt him the cards we'd hoped for. In my heart, I wanted him to have the chance to learn and grow, even if it wasn't through traditional education. Maybe, just maybe, stepping into the workforce and going out into the world to face its harsh realities could teach him lessons that books and classrooms never could. I thought of the men I'd known who had been forged by experience, by the grit of hard work, by the sacrifices they'd made. So, with a reluctant heart but a hopeful spirit, I agreed to let him go to the city. Before he left, I wanted to make sure he had something to fall back on, something that would give him a sense of security. I handed him 10,000 yuan, an amount I had carefully saved over the years, hoping I'd never need to touch it. I remember holding the money in my hand, feeling its weight, knowing it was more than just cash. It was a piece of the life we had built, a little nest egg my husband and I had tucked away for emergencies. With a heavy heart, I placed it in my son's hands, looking into his eyes, hoping he understood what this meant. "Use this only if you need it," I told him, my voice trembling slightly. "This is for emergencies, a safety net. Don't spend it unless you truly have no other choice." He nodded, his eyes filled with determination and perhaps a touch of pride. I could tell he was ready to take on the world. A few weeks later, he called me from the city, his voice brimming with excitement. He had found a job as a car mechanic, and his boss had agreed to pay him 3,000 yuan a month. I could feel his pride and happiness through the phone. For a mother who had been so worried, who had felt so much doubt and anxiety, this news was a blessing, a glimmer of hope in what had been a very dark year. I encouraged him, my heart swelling with pride. "Learn everything you can," I told him. "Become skilled, become strong. Don't give up, no matter how hard it gets." I wanted him to know that I believed in him and that I saw a future for him filled with growth and success. But then, in the middle of our conversation, his tone changed. It was subtle at first, but then he took a deep breath, and I could tell he was about to share something that weighed on him. "Mom," he said, hesitating slightly, "I want to buy a house here in the city." I was stunned, not because I thought it was a bad idea, but because it seemed so bold, so ambitious for an 18-year-old just starting. He went on to explain his reasoning, telling me that he was renting a small room for 1,000 yuan a month, which left him with very little to save. It was frustrating for him to see his hard-earned money disappear into rent, going to a landlord instead of building something for himself. "If I could buy a small apartment, then the money would at least go toward something that's mine," he said, his voice filled with a kind of hopeful determination. "I could pay off the mortgage little by little, and eventually, I'd own the place. I wouldn't have to keep giving my money to someone else." His words touched me deeply. On one hand, I was so proud of him, so moved by his desire to establish a foundation for himself, a place he could call his own. I knew that this was about more than just having a roof over his head. It was about security, about creating a future, about stepping into adulthood with confidence. But on the other hand, I was filled with trepidation. He was asking me to dip into his father's compensation fund, the money we had received after my husband's death, the last financial tie we had to him. That money was sacred, a reminder of the man we had lost, and it was meant to protect us from hardship, to provide for us in times of need. Using it for a mortgage felt like a significant step, one that I wasn't sure I was ready for. My son's logic made sense, and his intentions were noble. He wasn't asking out of greed or for luxury. He just wanted stability, something he could hold on to, something that would give him a sense of security in a city where he was still finding his way. I felt torn between honoring my husband's memory by protecting the money and honoring my son's future by supporting his dreams. At that moment, I realized that my son was no longer a boy. He was becoming a man, shaped by the loss of his father, driven by a desire to stand on his own 2 feet. As a mother, I wanted to shield him from every hardship, to keep him close, but I knew I had to let him grow, to allow him to chase his dreams, even if it meant parting with the safety we had left. With a deep breath and a heart full of love and worry, I told him I would think about it. I knew this decision was monumental, that it would impact both of us for years to come. But at that moment, hearing the strength in his voice, I felt a spark of hope, a hope that maybe, just maybe, we would both find our way forward, even through the loss, even through the unknown. When I heard my son's words, I found myself standing at a crossroads of emotions. Here was my only child, full of dreams and ambition, asking for my support as he built a life in the bustling city. And yet, I was just a rural woman, unaccustomed to the luxuries of city life, with no pension or savings to fall back on. The hard truth was that this money was all I had left to rely on in my old age. My husband had passed away, leaving me with only a modest income from our small farm and the animals I raised. I knew that once this money was gone, I would have little to secure me as I grew older. The weight of this realization filled me with hesitation, uncertainty clouding my heart. But as I looked into my son's hopeful eyes, I couldn't hold back my concerns. I told him everything, about my worries for the future, about the loneliness I sometimes felt in our quiet village, about how this money was my safety net. I feared that without it, I might become a burden to him, something I desperately wanted to avoid. Listening patiently, my son then looked at me with a reassuring smile and said, "Mom, don't worry about your retirement or your future. I will always be here for you. Once I've established myself and my salary doubles, I'll bring you to live with me in the city. You'll never have to worry again. I'll support you for the rest of your life." At that moment, his words touched me deeply, filling me with profound joy and relief. For so long, I had lived with the fear of growing old alone, of having no one to lean on. But here was my son, making a promise that I had longed to hear. The very idea of leaving behind the quiet, solitary life of the countryside and joining him in the vibrant city made my heart swell with happiness. I imagined a life where I wouldn't be alone, where my days would be filled with new experiences, and most importantly, where I could watch my son thrive and succeed. Overcome by a sense of love and pride, I felt a surge of confidence in his dreams. Without another moment of doubt, I transferred the remaining 290,000 yuan to him, hoping this would help him buy the home he had envisioned in the city. I wanted him to feel that he wasn't alone in his journey, that I was with him every step of the way, no matter the cost. With this money, my son took out a loan and secured a modest 3-bedroom apartment. I knew it wasn't a mansion, but to him, it was a palace, a place he could finally call his own. Yet, due to limited funds, he could not afford to complete the decoration. He moved into the unfinished space, with bare walls and concrete floors, determined to make it a home over time. He assured me that he would work hard, save little by little, and one day make it a beautiful place to live. Although his words comforted me, I couldn't shake the worry of him living in such sparse conditions. My heart ached at the thought of him coming home to cold, empty rooms after a long day's work. Living far away in the countryside, I felt helpless but resolute. I may not have much, but I could still find a way to contribute to his new life. I poured my heart into raising as many chickens, ducks, and even 2 sturdy pigs, devoting all my time to making sure they thrived. Every morning, I'd wake before dawn, feeding them, cleaning their pens, and tending to them as though each animal brought me closer to helping my son complete his home. I cared for them with all the love a mother has, knowing that every egg, every feather, every little effort could add to the future I dreamed of for him. When the end of the year approached, I gathered all I had earned from selling the chickens, ducks, and pigs. It was a modest sum, just a few thousand yuan, but in my hands, it felt like a fortune, like an offering of love and devotion. I saved every single coin, counting them with the utmost care, feeling a deep sense of purpose with each piece. When my son came home for the new year, I couldn't wait to see his face light up. I handed him the money, my hands trembling with pride and hope, and told him, "Son, take this and use it for your home. Make it a place where you feel warmth and comfort. I don't want you living in an unfinished apartment with only cold walls to greet you every night." Seeing his expression, filled with gratitude and love, made every sacrifice worth it. He hugged me tightly, and I felt a bond so strong it erased any lingering worries I had about the future. In that moment, I realized that the love I had given to my son would always return to me, in ways I couldn't measure in money or material wealth. This was my legacy. Not the money, but the support, the endless sacrifices, and the belief that I had in him. And I knew that no matter what challenges came our way, we would face them together, bound by the unwavering strength of family and love. If you are still watching this video and find these lessons useful, please comment 2 below to let me know that you are still here with me. When my son first told me he wanted to decorate our home, he spoke with such enthusiasm and vision that I could hardly believe my ears. He explained that decorating a house was no simple task. It wasn't something you could just throw together. To him, a well-decorated home was essential. It was more than just paint and furniture. It was about creating a space that reflected who we were, a sanctuary where we could feel proud and comfortable. But, he emphasized, this couldn't be done casually or with shortcuts. He made it clear that if we didn't do it right from the beginning, redoing it later would be an even bigger task, an enormous project that would demand even more money and effort. Listening to him speak so passionately made me realize how much this meant to him. But I couldn't help but feel a pang of worry and disbelief. I looked him in the eyes and cautiously asked, "Son, just how much money would it take to decorate our home the way you envision?" I hoped his response would be manageable, something we could realistically aim for without putting too much strain on ourselves. But then he replied, without hesitation, "At least 150,000 yuan. My heart sank like a stone. That number echoed in my mind, a weighty reminder of all the financial challenges we'd already faced. 150,000 yuan. It felt like an enormous mountain looming before us, towering, unreachable. I couldn't even fathom saving up that kind of money. I kept thinking, how could we ever manage to set aside such a large sum? It felt like an impossible dream, a goal far beyond our modest means. So, with a heavy heart, I gently tried to reason with him. I told him that our family's financial situation was simple. We weren't like the city folks who could afford to decorate their homes lavishly, with all the luxury and style money could buy. We didn't have the means to make our home look like something out of a magazine, nor did we have the kind of luck that others seem to enjoy. I wanted him to understand that maybe this dream was too big for us, that perhaps it was something we'd have to set aside. But my son looked at me with unwavering determination, his eyes shining with an intensity one hadn't seen before. He replied, "Mom, I don't believe in luck. I believe in hard work and setting goals. If I have a goal, I'll do everything in my power to achieve it." His words moved me deeply, and at that moment, I realized how fiercely he believed in this dream. Despite my reservations, I couldn't bring myself to stand in his way. So, we embarked on this journey together, a journey of saving and sacrifice. Every coin we earned, every small bill we managed to save, it all went into a small tin we kept in the kitchen, our little reservoir of hope. Weeks turned into months, and months turned into years. Each day was a lesson in patience, as we cut back on unnecessary expenses, skipped treats and outings, and put every spare yuan into that tin. We watched the total grow slowly, painfully, hoping it would someday be enough. 3 years passed. 3 long, hard years of sacrifice and saving. And yet, even after all that time, we were still far from reaching that lofty 150,000 yuan goal. Each time I counted the money, I felt a swirl of emotions, a mixture of pride for how far we'd come and frustration at how much further we still had to go. I began to wonder if we would ever reach it. Would we be saving forever? Then, during the New Year celebrations, my son returned home with a young woman by his side. He introduced her as his girlfriend, and I could tell from the moment I saw her that she was from a world very different from ours. She was beautiful, no doubt, but it was her demeanor that struck me the most. She carried herself with a poise and grace that spoke of wealth, of privilege, traits I hadn't seen up close before. Everything about her, from her finely tailored clothes to the slight arch of her brow, seemed to whisper that she was accustomed to finer things in life. As she looked around our modest home, I could feel her gaze lingering on each imperfection, the worn curtains, the chipped paint, the aging furniture. And when she looked at me, there was something in her eyes, a fleeting look of disdain, almost as if she felt we were beneath her. Her gaze was like a small sting to my pride, a reminder of all the things we lacked. My chest tightened, and for a moment, I felt small, insignificant in the face of her wealth and confidence. Later that evening, my son confided in me, telling me more about her. He explained that her family was exceptionally wealthy and that they had resources we couldn't even imagine. He hinted, almost excitedly, that if they were to get married, all of our worries about the house decoration would disappear. He assured me that her family could easily cover the 150,000 yuan. It would be nothing to them. His eyes sparkled as he spoke, filled with dreams of a future where money would no longer be a barrier. As much as I wanted to share his excitement, my heart was weighed down by a deep sense of unease. I couldn't shake the feeling that this was too good to be true. Could this girl, with her wealth and privilege, really be the answer to all our struggles? Could her family truly make this dream come true without any strings attached? The practical side of me, the side that had lived a life of caution and careful budgeting, couldn't fully trust in this unexpected blessing. Yet, I stayed silent. I didn't voice my doubts, didn't argue or object. I knew that my son's determination was as strong as ever, and I feared that expressing my concerns might drive a wedge between us. I could only sit quietly and listen, watching him as he spoke about his dreams, hoping he wouldn't be disappointed. In my heart, I prayed that this relationship would bring him happiness and not the heartbreak I feared. As I watched him with his girlfriend that evening, laughing and dreaming of a life beyond our current reality, I felt a deep mixture of pride and anxiety. I longed for him to find the life he deserved, but I couldn't help but worry about the cost. I clung to the hope that, no matter where his journey took him, he would remember the love and sacrifices that had built our little home, the place we had shared so many dreams. After a while, my son called me with excitement to tell me that the house was finally starting to be decorated. He mentioned that all the decoration costs were generously covered by his girlfriend's family. I felt a mix of emotions hearing this. On one hand, I was grateful they were able to contribute. It gave me a small glimmer of relief, knowing my son wouldn't be burdened by this expense. But deep down, there was an ache, a reminder that I couldn't be the one to provide this for him. I tried to brush it off, assuring myself that as long as he was happy, that was all that mattered. When the house was ready, beautifully decorated, and set for a new chapter, my son and his girlfriend decided to marry. I remember arriving at the wedding ceremony, my heart swelling with pride and anticipation, hoping to be involved, to share in this joyful moment as his mother. But as I looked around, I was quietly led to the far corner of the hall, a place so inconspicuous that I might as well have been invisible. The joy I'd felt a moment before turned to a deep sadness. No one knew I was the groom's mother. I watched from the shadows as the ceremony unfolded, my son radiant and happy, but each passing moment seemed to remind me of my place, or lack thereof, in his new life. After the ceremony, my son must have noticed my discomfort. He came over, and with a gentle tone, tried to reassure me. "Mom," he said softly, "our family doesn't have much, and we're not like them. Please bear with this for now. One day, I'll make you proud. When I succeed, I promise things will be different." His words were like a lifeline, a small spark of hope in the sadness that had taken hold of my heart. I knew he was right. Our circumstances had always been modest, and I tried to raise him with as much as I could give. So, I told myself that if enduring this small heartache could help him build a better life, I would do it. I had no husband to lean on, and no savings to secure my future. All my dreams, my hopes, and even my sense of belonging were tied to him. So I swallowed my pride and convinced myself that one day, it would all be worth it. As time passed, my son moved to the city with his wife, finding work that paid him a decent salary. I was happy for him, knowing he was making a life for himself. Although his income had doubled, I knew that life in the city could be challenging, and I didn't want to be a burden. Back home, I managed with what little I had. I worked hard on the small plot of land I owned, tending to it as best I could. It wasn't much, but it provided enough food to sustain me. I wanted to be self-sufficient so that I wouldn't weigh down my son. Even so, I still longed to help him in any way I could. I started selling eggs, saving the small amount I earned, and whenever I had enough, I sent it to him. I didn't expect anything in return. It was just my way of showing my love and wishing him happiness in his new life. But as months turned into years, I noticed something that pierced my heart. My son's calls became less frequent. He used to call me every week, but now, weeks would go by without a word. And when I called him, he rarely answered. At first, I told myself he was simply busy adjusting to his new life. I tried not to overthink it, choosing instead to believe that he was working hard to achieve the success he had once promised me. Then, one day, I overheard some neighbors talking about how my daughter-in-law had given birth to a baby girl, my granddaughter. My flesh and blood, and I hadn't even known she was coming into the world. The shock and sorrow hit me all at once, a sharp, undeniable pain in my heart. I couldn't understand how my son, my only child, had not thought to share this news with me. I felt as if I had become a stranger in his life. Desperate for answers, I tried calling him again, but it was my daughter-in-law who picked up the phone. I could hear the indifference in her voice as she explained that my son was at work and too busy to talk. Then, with a bluntness that felt like a slap, she told me not to call him so often anymore, saying he was very busy. She went on to say that if I had time, I should come to the city to take care of my granddaughter. I was speechless. She wasn't asking me. She was ordering me as if I were her servant, bound to fulfill her demands. I wanted to tell her that I was getting older and that my health was no longer what it used to be. I struggled with back pain and arthritis from years of hard work. I knew I couldn't handle the demands of childcare. So I tried to explain, choosing my words carefully, but before I could finish, she cut me off. She reminded me, with a tone that lacked any trace of warmth or respect, that as I got older, I would need my son's support, so I had better do as she asked. Her words stung, each one feeling like a wound to my pride and dignity. My hand trembled as I hung up the phone, anger and heartbreak overwhelming me. If you are still watching this video and find these lessons useful, please comment 3 below to let me know that you are still here with me. In the quiet that followed, I began to confront a painful truth. My son, the one person I had counted on for my old age, was drifting away. The promises he had made felt like distant echoes, and I realized that I could no longer place my hope or security in him. It broke my heart, a sorrow so deep that it felt like it would never heal. I had sacrificed so much, all with the belief that he would be there for me as I had been there for him. But now, I knew I had to find a way to face the rest of my life on my own. That night, I stayed awake, thinking of what lay ahead. I could no longer pretend that one day he would come back to me, that he would fulfill those promises. I needed to take control of my future, not waiting until age and frailty left me with no choices. It was a bitter pill to swallow, the realization that I had been alone all along. But in that loneliness, a new resolve began to form. I would not wait for anyone to look after me. I would rely on myself and build a life that I could count on, no matter how modest. It was painful to accept, but I knew in my heart that if I didn't take these steps now, I would only end up feeling more abandoned and helpless later. I began to plan my days differently, no longer waiting for a call that might never come, no longer clinging to the hope that he would reach out. I turned my focus to the land I worked, my small sources of income, and the quiet satisfaction of managing my life independently. And though my heart still ached with the loss of the son I had once known, I learned to carry that sorrow with a strength I never knew I had. In the end, I found a strange sense of peace, knowing that I had the resilience to face whatever lay ahead, with or without him. As we come to the end of this heartfelt story, take a moment to reflect on the lessons woven into these experiences. What insights have you gained about family, sacrifice, or the importance of self-reliance? Sometimes, life's hardest moments teach us to find strength within ourselves, even when it feels like we're standing alone. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Please share in the comments below one thing you've learned from this story and how you'll bring it into practice in your own life. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a comment below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.